Hello class, today we're going to go over the pathways our body uses to produce ATP from the complete breakdown of one molecule of glucose and one molecule of fat. First, we're going to start off with the breakdown of glucose molecule through both pathways aerobically and anaerobically. An aerobic breakdown of glucose, just from a glycolysis standpoint. Glycolysis is the first type of metabolic pathway in the cell in all types of living organisms. This pathway does not require oxygen. This is why it is also the first pathway in the anaerobic breakdown of glucose. In addition to the aerobic breakdown of glucose, this is the primary source for most organisms. In this process, one molecule of glucose is converted into two molecules of pyruvate, which generates energy in the form of two ATP molecules, which is total net of two molecules. In additional fact, there are four molecules of ATP, which are produced per molecule of glucose. However, two of these are used, which is why in this states the net total is 2 ATP. So, in the eukaryotic organisms, oxidative phosphorylation takes place in the mitochondria. It oxidizes the NADH, which is produced from the Krebs cycle. ATP is then synthesized by an enzyme called ATP synthesis enzyme, which is then used to drive the phosphorylation to ADP. The electrons are then transferred to oxygen. With the addition of two protons, water is formed. In this process, where one NADH2 goes through oxidative phosphorylation, three ATP molecules are being synthesized. Whenever one FADH2 goes through oxidative phosphorylation, the entire process from acetyl coenzyme A, two ATP are synthesized. So then we have phosphorylation, or substrate level phosphorylation, which equals two ATP molecules. So the total is 36 ATP molecules. This means that if you take one molecule of glucose in hydrolysis, you get 36 ATP. This is a lot of energy that is produced. 36 ATP molecules for every one molecule of glucose is very efficient. So it can be said that the aerobic breakdown of glucose is a higher energy yielding process. Thus, the process of aerobic breakdown of glucose breaks down the single glucose molecule to yield 36 units of energy storing ATP molecules. It is able to convert glucose to ATP more efficiently without creating any excess waste or byproducts, as is the case in anaerobic breakdown of glucose. So to put this in exercise limiting for aerobic breakdown to produce ATP, the more you use. So the exercises that I would say, or how to relate it to the real world, would be like a marathon runner, someone who doesn't get their heart rate elevated, but they need more stores of energy to last longer throughout their marathon, their triathlons, stuff like that. Someone who's an avid bike rider and bikes long distance, they need to conserve that energy. They need to be able to produce a lot of it. So the main energy, I would say, would be marathon runners would be your main people there. So now we're going to go to the anaerobic breakdown of glucose. There are two ways in which anaerobic breakdown of glucose can occur. Glucose can be broken down into energy plus ethanol plus carbon dioxide. Glucose can be broken down to form energy through ATP plus lactic acid. Sorry, just make sure I have the right page. Lactic acid. So the anaerobic breakdown of glucose occurs in our bodies mainly during quick, intense spurts of exercise, such as sprints or weightlifting. During these forms of exercise, the body would not be able to provide enough oxygen for the normal aerobic processes to occur. The heart would try to pump oxygenated blood around the body, but it would not be able to pump it all in areas where it would be required fast enough. This is when anaerobic breakdown of glucose would occur. This breakdown process only needs glucose and doesn't require any oxygen. By converting glucose into ATP molecules, in addition to creating a waste byproduct known as lactic acid. This is lactic acid right here. If accumulated in the muscle, can reduce acidity and pH. The muscles are only able to absorb a certain amount of lactic acid before they begin to cramp and seize up. This is why anaerobic respiration is sustained for only a short amount of time. This process of anaerobic breakdown of glucose is relatively less energy yielding compared to aerobic processes. During the anaerobic respiration, in which glucose is broken down to form ethanol, 2 ATP molecules are produced for every glucose molecule which is used up in the reaction. Similarly, for the lactic fermentation, 2 ATP molecules are produced for every 1 molecule of glucose that is used up in the process. So 4 ATP molecules are produced from the anaerobic breakdown of glucose, but a net gain of ATP is 2 because 2 ATP molecules are used in order to go under the anaerobic process. This I can say that in the anaerobic breakdown of glucose, 1 molecule glucose is used to obtain 2 units of energy storing ATP molecules, so 2 total molecules, as opposed to 36 ATP molecules, which are produced for aerobic breakdown of glucose. So there we have it for our glucose molecules. So we have 36 total yielding ATP, and for aerobic respiration, anaerobic respiration yields 2 ATP. So next we're going to move into our next source. So we have fats. Our second pathway we're going to look at today is the breakdown of 1 fat molecule. The next favorite foods to make energy after sugars are fats. Fats are stored in our fat cells as triglycerides. Just like how glucose is stored as glycogen in our liver and muscles. Triglycerides are made up of 3 saturated fatty acids. Remember, a fatty acid is a long chain of carbons with hydrogens attached. Fatty acids are always an even number of carbon ions. You'll never find a fatty acid that has odd number of carbons. What happens is that this fatty acid is broken up 2 carbons at a time, which turns into 2 carbon acetyl coenzymes. This is called beta oxidation. So it's going to follow this process right here. Then they are broken down in the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle as if they were sugars. We know a fatty acid is not a small molecule such as glucose, which is 6 carbon atoms long. It's more like 24 long, so that it would form 12 acetyl coenzyme A, and since it was a triglyceride to begin with, there would be 3 fatty acids. So imagine the catabolism of the triglyceride will create 36 coenzyme A's at once, and it will flood the system, and they can't go through the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle fast enough, so some of these acetyl coenzyme A's become or are kept as acids. This tends to be formed when the body is breaking down fats faster than normal. So if you each form of fat provides twice as much energy as carbs or proteins. Anytime there's an increased rate of fat breakdown, there's more kept acids. Note that since the fats are turned into coenzyme A that enter the Krebs cycle, or citric acid cycle, that means they have to have oxygen, stated right here. Sugars are the only foods that can be broken apart without the need of O2. So good fats are marathon runners are a great example of how fat is broken down into energy. So just like the aerobic respiration for glucose, it needed oxygen. So marathon runners, longer durated exercisers, need that fat or the oxygenated glucose breakdown. So fat oxidation, let's break down the steps. Fats can be used in the oxidative energy system. Triglycerides stored in the fat cells can be broken down by enzyme hormone-sensitive lipase. This releases free fatty acids from the fat cells into the blood, where they can circulate and enter the muscle fibers. Additionally, limited quantities of triglycerides are stored within the muscle, along with a form of hormone-sensitive lipase to produce an intermuscular source of free fatty acids. Free fatty acids then enter the mitochondria, where they undergo beta oxidation, a series of reactions in which the free fatty acids are broken down, resulting in the formation of acetyl coenzyme A and hydrogen protons. Acetyl coenzyme A enters the Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle directly in the hydrogen ions are carried by NADH and FADH2 to the electric transport chain directly in the hydrogen ions. So here we're going to calculate the amount of ATP produced by one typical triglyceride molecule, so our fat molecule. So we have one molecule of glycerol right here equals 19 ATP. So glycolysis plus the Krebs cycle. Then you have 18 carbon fatty acids, which is beta oxidation plus the Krebs cycle. Then we have 147 ATP per fatty acid times 3 of those triglyceride molecules equals 441, giving us a total ATP production of 460. So there we have it. We have 460 total ATP production for fats. We have 36 total ATP productions per one molecule of glucose for aerobic capacity. And then for anaerobic capacity, there are 2. So there we have it today. We broke down the 2 different energy pathways for production of ATP. And here we have it, just for my charts that I showed you today. Here's my cited sources, just up here, these 2, where I got my charts and my diagrams. So thank you very much. Have a great day.